The August heat in Chicago pressed against my skin like a living thing as I stood in the marble hallway of the Vieira estate, my wedding dress rustling with each shallow breath I took. 22 years old, and this was supposed to be the most important day of my life. Instead, my hands trembled as I clutched the pearl-encrusted bodice, listening to voices drift from the study just around the corner. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I'd been searching for my makeup artist, lost in this labyrinth of wealth and power that would soon become my prison. But when I heard Elio's voice, low and commanding as always, I froze. I don't want her. I never did. The words hit me like a physical blow. I pressed my back against the cool marble wall, my elaborate updo suddenly feeling too heavy, the veil cascading down my back, a mockery of the virginal innocence it was meant to represent. Then why go through with it, boss? That was Bruno, Elio's right hand, the man who had delivered the marriage contract to my father 3 months ago like it was a business merger. Which, I supposed it was. Because her father controls the South Side distribution, Elio replied, and I could picture him perfectly, even though I couldn't see him. 37 years old, with dark hair always swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Cold gray eyes that had looked at me exactly twice during our brief engagement, both times assessing me like I was merchandise. The Santoro family has been encroaching on our territory. Marrying Ginevra consolidates our power, eliminates a potential rival, and secures the ports her father controls. My father, Vittorio Moretti, who had sat me down 6 months ago and explained that my life, my dreams of studying art history in Florence, my hope for a future built on something other than blood and power, none of it mattered. The Vieira family wanted an alliance. I was the price. She's pretty enough, another voice chimed in. Dario, Elio's cousin, who always looked at me like I was something he wanted to consume. Good breeding stock. I bit my lip hard enough to taste copper, fighting the urge to storm into that room and tell them all exactly what I thought of being reduced to my reproductive potential. But I'd been raised in this world. I knew the rules. Women didn't speak unless spoken to. We smiled, we obeyed, we produced heirs. We survived. Pretty isn't what I need in a wife, Elio said. And there was something in his voice I couldn't quite identify. Bitterness? Exhaustion? I need someone I can trust, someone who understands this life. Not some sheltered girl who thinks the mafia is something romantic she read about in novels. The injustice of it stole my breath. Sheltered? I'd watched my mother deteriorate from the stress of being married to a man like my father. I'd seen what this life did to women, how it hollowed them out until they were nothing but beautiful shells. I'd spent my entire life preparing to escape it, only to be handed over to a man who commanded even more fear than my father. So what's the plan after the wedding? Bruno asked. She moves into the East Wing? She can have whatever rooms she wants, Elio replied dismissively. As long as she stays out of my business and produces an heir within the year, she can redecorate the entire estate for all I care. Something inside me cracked. Not my heart. I'd never been naive enough to expect love from this arrangement. But my pride, my sense of self, the small, stubborn part of me that had hoped maybe, just maybe, there could be mutual respect if not affection. You're a cold bastard, Elio, Dario laughed. At least pretend to want her on your wedding night. I'll do my duty. The words were flat, final, nothing more. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I gathered my skirts and ran, the sound of my heels on marble echoing like gunshots through the empty hallway. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not yet. Not where anyone could see. The powder room was blessedly empty. I locked the door and braced myself against the sink, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, professionally applied makeup, highlighting features I'd inherited from my Sicilian grandmother. Dark eyes that usually sparkled with defiance, now dull with resignation. Full lips painted the color of dried blood. A bride. a commodity, a means to an end. My phone buzzed in the small clutch I'd left on the counter. Lena, my best friend since childhood, the only person in my life who understood what it meant to be born into this world without choosing it. 10 minutes until processional. Are you ready? Ready? What a ridiculous question. Was I ready to marry a man who didn't want me? Who saw me as nothing more than a strategic acquisition? Who planned to do his duty and nothing more? I typed back with shaking fingers. Need 5 more minutes. The truth was, I needed a lifetime. I needed to be anywhere but here, wearing anything but this dress, about to pledge my life to a man who had just shattered whatever fragile hope I'd been clinging to. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. Ginevra. My father's voice, gruff with impatience. What are you doing in there? The ceremony starts in 5 minutes. I smoothed my dress, checked my makeup, and unlocked the door. Vittorio Moretti filled the doorway, his barrel chest straining against his tuxedo, his face ruddy from years of good wine and bad decisions. You look pale, he observed, his eyes narrowing. Are you sick? Just nervous, I lied, because telling him I'd overheard my future husband's contempt would accomplish nothing. My father didn't care about my feelings. He cared about the alliance, the power, the expansion of territory that this marriage would bring. There's nothing to be nervous about. He offered his arm, and I took it because I had no choice. Elio Vieira is a powerful man. You're lucky to be marrying him. Lucky. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. As we walked toward the private chapel where 200 guests waited, I caught glimpses of the life I was entering. Armed guards at every corner, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Waiters serving champagne worth more than most people's monthly salary. Women dripping in diamonds, their smiles as fake as their compliments. Men conducting business deals between toasts, their hands stained with blood no amount of money could wash clean. This was my future. This was my life. The chapel doors opened, and the string quartet began playing Pachelbel's canon. Every head turned to watch me walk down the aisle on my father's arm, and I kept my spine straight, my chin high, my expression serene. Years of training in how to be the perfect mafia wife were paying off, even if everything inside me was screaming to run. And there, at the altar, stood Elio Vieira, 6 feet 2 inches of controlled power. His black tuxedo fitted perfectly to his broad shoulders and lean waist. His dark hair was immaculate, his face expressionless as he watched me approach. Those cold gray eyes met mine, and I searched desperately for some warmth, some sign that what I'd overheard was just wedding day nerves talking. I found nothing. The ceremony passed in a blur. I heard myself repeating vows I didn't mean, felt Elio's fingers cold against mine as he slipped on the wedding band, tasted champagne when he kissed me with all the passion of a business transaction being finalized. The guests applauded. Someone made a toast about new beginnings and powerful alliances. The quartet played something upbeat and celebratory, and through it all, I felt nothing but a growing numbness spreading through my chest. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and imported marble. I smiled until my face hurt, danced with men whose names I immediately forgot, accepted congratulations from women who looked at me with a mixture of pity and envy. Pity because they knew what being married to a man like Elio meant. Envy because of the power that came with the Vieira name. Elio barely spoke to me. He was always across the room, deep in conversation with other men, conducting business at our wedding reception like I was just another detail that had been handled. When he did approach, it was to introduce me to someone important, his hand proprietarily at my waist, his smile not reaching his eyes. My wife, he would say, and the word sounded foreign in his mouth. Ginevra. Not my beautiful wife, not the woman I love. Just my name, stated as fact, devoid of emotion. As midnight approached, Lena found me on the terrace, staring out at the city lights that stretched to the horizon. "You look miserable," she said bluntly, pressing a glass of actual champagne into my hand. Not the sparkling wine they'd been serving the lesser guests, but the real thing. The bottles Elio kept for family and close associates. "I am miserable," I admitted, because lying to Lena was pointless. She'd known me too long, seen too much. "Did something happen?" Her dark eyes searched my face. "Beyond the obvious nightmare of marrying a man you barely know?" I told her. Everything I'd overheard, every cold word, every dismissive comment. By the time I finished, her expression had shifted from concern to fury. "That bastard," she hissed. "I should tell my father to pull out of the shipping deal. See how Elio likes losing the Mediterranean routes." "Don't." I gripped her arm. "It'll only make things worse for me. He'll blame me for costing him business." "So what are you going to do? Spend the rest of your life being treated like a broodmare?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. What could I do? Divorce wasn't an option in our world. Running would get me killed, and probably get my family killed too. This was my life now, for better or worse. Mostly worse. "I'm going to survive," I said finally, echoing the mantra my mother had whispered to me countless times. "Just like every other woman in this life." "You deserve better than survival, Ginny." Lena's voice cracked. "You deserve love, respect, partnership. Not this." Well, I'm not going to get it from him. I drained my champagne, welcoming the burn. So I'll take what I can get. Security, wealth, protection. Maybe that's enough. Even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. It would never be enough. But it was all I had. The night ended with Elio and me being escorted to the master suite by a gaggle of drunk relatives making crude jokes about wedding nights and air production. I kept my smile fixed in place, let them believe whatever they wanted to believe, and finally, the door closed behind us, alone with my husband for the first time. Elio immediately went to the bar and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, downing it in one swallow. Then he poured another and turned to face me. "You can take the guest room if you'd prefer," he said, his tone making it clear he hoped I would. "Or stay here. Your choice." So this was it. The moment where he would do his duty. Nothing more. The moment where I would become truly his, in the only way that mattered to men like him. I thought about refusing, about demanding the guest room and whatever dignity I could salvage. But then I thought about the overheard conversation, about his dismissive assessment of me as nothing more than a strategic asset, and something stubborn and reckless rose in my chest. "I'll stay," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "After all, you need an heir within the year, don't you?" His eyes narrowed slightly, the first real reaction I'd gotten from him all day. "You heard that." It wasn't a question. I heard everything. I turned my back to him, reaching for the zipper of my dress. "I heard how you don't want me, how I'm just a sheltered girl who doesn't understand this life, how you plan to do your duty and nothing more." The zipper stuck halfway down. I struggled with it for a moment, frustration and humiliation burning through me in equal measure. Then Elio was there, his fingers brushing mine aside, his touch surprisingly gentle as he worked the zipper free. His breath was warm against my neck, his body close enough that I could feel his heat. "You shouldn't have heard that," he said quietly. But I did. I stepped away as soon as the dress was loose, clutching it to my chest. So let's not pretend this is anything other than what it is, a transaction, an alliance, a means to an end. I walked into the bathroom and closed the door, leaning against it as I finally let the tears fall. 3 months of marriage, and Elio and I had perfected the art of being strangers sharing a last name. He lived in the west wing of the estate, I in the east. We took meals separately, appeared together only when business or social obligations demanded it, and spoke to each other with the distant courtesy of acquaintances rather than spouses. The wedding night had been exactly what he'd promised. Duty fulfilled, nothing more. He'd been efficient, almost clinical, and hadn't touched me since. I told myself I didn't care. Told myself the relief I felt at his absence was preference, not rejection. Told myself that building a life around charity work and art collecting was enough. I was lying to myself, and I knew it. But self-deception was better than acknowledging the hollow ache in my chest every time I saw him across a room, surrounded by men who would die for him, commanding respect and fear with equal ease. Better than admitting that somewhere in the past 3 months, I'd started noticing things. The way his rare smiles transformed his face, how his hands moved with controlled grace, the flash of something almost vulnerable in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. I was falling for a man who didn't want me, and it was pathetic. September brought the first hint of autumn to Chicago, and with it, Bruno's increasingly frequent visits to my wing of the estate. "Mrs. Vieira," he'd say, always formal, despite the fact that I'd told him repeatedly to call me Ginevra. "The boss wants to know if you'll be attending the charity gala tonight." Or, "The boss says you're free to redecorate the solarium if you'd like." Or, "The boss noticed you've been walking the gardens alone. He's assigned additional security." Always the boss. Never Elio. Never your husband. It took me 2 weeks to realize what was happening. Elio was watching me, not through Bruno's reports, though those were certainly part of it. Through the security cameras positioned throughout the estate, through the guards who shadowed my every move, through the staff who reported back to him every detail of my daily routine. The realization should have angered me. Instead, I found it almost amusing. The man who claimed not to want me was tracking my movements like I was a valuable asset that might disappear. "Why does he care what I do?" I asked Bruno one afternoon, as he delivered yet another message about my schedule. Bruno's weathered face remained carefully neutral. "The boss takes his responsibilities seriously, ma'am. Your safety is his responsibility. My safety or my availability." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. In case he needs to produce that air he's so concerned about. Something flickered in Bruno's eyes. "Mrs. Vieira, if I may speak frankly." I nodded, curious despite myself. "The boss isn't an easy man to understand," Bruno said carefully. "But he's not the man you think he is either." Before I could ask what he meant, my phone buzzed. Lena, with our weekly lunch date reminder. The restaurant was in neutral territory, a upscale Italian place owned by a family not affiliated with any of the major organizations. Lena was already seated when I arrived, her security detail taking up position at a nearby table, their eyes constantly scanning the room. "You look terrible," she announced as I sat down. "Not sleeping?" "Not really. I hadn't slept well since the wedding, my bed too large and too empty despite my relief at Elio's absence." "He's still keeping his distance?" I nodded, focusing on the menu though I already knew what I wanted. Complete radio silence unless he needs his dutiful wife to appear at some function. "Men are idiots," Lena declared, signaling the waiter. "Especially men in our world. They think showing emotion is weakness." "It's not about emotion," I said quietly. "He just doesn't want me. He made that clear before we were even married." The waiter arrived with wine, and Lena waited until he'd left before leaning forward. "Can I tell you something? Something I heard from my father?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "The Santoro family is making moves," she said, her voice low. "They've been buying up politicians, bribing cops, consolidating power on the north side. My father thinks they're planning something big." The Santoro family. Our rivals, the ones Elio had mentioned when explaining why he was marrying me. Their territory bordered ours, and there had been tensions for years, small skirmishes and proxy wars that never quite erupted into full-scale conflict. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked, though a sick feeling was already forming in my stomach. "They know you're Elio's weak spot," Lena said bluntly. "The only thing he cares about beyond power. Going after you would be a direct attack on him. That's ridiculous. He doesn't care about me at all." "Are you sure about that?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "Because from what my father says, Elio's been obsessed with your security since the wedding. Tripled the guards, installed new surveillance systems, personally vets anyone who gets within 50 feet of you." The conversation with Bruno suddenly made more sense. Your safety is his responsibility. That's just protecting his investment, I argued. I'm his wife. It would be a sign of weakness if something happened to me. "Keep telling yourself that," Lena said, but her expression was knowing. "But maybe pay attention to what he does, not what he says." We finished lunch discussing safer topics, upcoming charity events, and Lena's latest battle with her father over her refusing yet another arranged marriage. By the time we parted ways, the afternoon sun was slanting through the Chicago skyline, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. My driver, Marcus, was waiting at the curb, but as we pulled away from the restaurant, I noticed a black SUV behind us that hadn't been there before. "Marcus," I said quietly, my heart beginning to race. "Are we being followed?" His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and I saw his jaw tighten. "Yes, ma'am. Hold on." He accelerated smoothly, weaving through traffic with the skill of someone trained for exactly this situation. But the SUV kept pace, matching our every move. My phone was already in my hand when it rang, Elio's name flashing on the screen. "Where are you?" His voice was clipped, urgent. "Leaving lunch with Lena. Marcus says we're being followed." "I know. We're tracking you. Stay on the phone with me." There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Fear. "Elio." "Just stay on the phone, Ginevra." The use of my name, not my wife or some formal title, made my breath catch. "Bruno is 2 minutes behind you with backup. Marcus knows the protocol." The SUV suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside us. I caught a glimpse of tinted windows, of something metallic being raised. Marcus jerked the wheel hard right, and we careened down a side street as the sound of gunfire erupted behind us. I screamed, dropping the phone, clutching the seat as Marcus drove like a man possessed. "Mrs. Vieira!" Elio's voice, tinny and distant from where the phone had fallen. "Ginevra!" I grabbed for it with shaking hands. "I'm here. I'm okay." "Where's Marcus taking you?" "I don't know. I looked out the window, trying to orient myself. "We're heading toward the warehouse district." More gunfire, closer this time. The rear window exploded inward, safety glass showering over me. I ducked down, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. "Hold on." "Ma'am," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Almost there." Almost where? I wanted to ask, but then I saw it. One of Elio's properties, a nondescript building that looked like every other warehouse in the district, but was actually one of his most secure locations. The gates opened as we approached, and Marcus gunned the engine, speeding through just as they began to close behind us. The pursuing SUV slammed into them, unable to follow. Armed guards appeared from every direction, surrounding our car. And then Elio was there, yanking open my door, his face pale beneath his normally golden complexion, his eyes wild with something that looked suspiciously like terror. "Are you hurt?" His hands were on me, checking for injuries with a thoroughness that belied his usual distance. "Did they hit you?" "Talk to me, Ginevra." "I'm fine," I managed, though I was shaking so hard I could barely form words. "The window broke, but I'm not hurt." He pulled me from the car and into his arms, crushing me against his chest with a force that drove the air from my lungs. I could feel his heart racing, matching the frantic rhythm of my own, could feel him trembling almost imperceptibly. "Christo," he breathed into my hair. "When I saw the tracker deviate from your normal route." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I understood. For the first time since our wedding, Elio Vieira was showing me something real. Not the cold businessman, not the ruthless mafia boss, but a man who had been genuinely afraid. Afraid for me. The safe house was everything I'd expected from one of Elio's properties. Fortified, luxurious, and utterly isolating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago River, bulletproof glass filtering the late afternoon sun into amber streams across imported marble floors. Guards stationed at every entrance. Security systems that would make a government facility jealous. A gilded cage, just like the estate. But this time, Elio was locked inside it with me. "You'll stay here until we neutralize the threat," he said, pacing the main room like a caged predator. He'd shed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. His usually immaculate hair was disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. "Bruno is coordinating with our people. The Santoro family will pay for this." I sat on the leather sofa, still trembling despite the blanket someone had draped over my shoulders, watching him. This Elio was different from the man I'd married. Agitated, almost frantic, his legendary control fracturing at the edges. "How long?" I asked quietly. "As long as it takes." He stopped pacing, his gray eyes finally meeting mine. "Days, weeks, however long until I'm certain you're safe. So I'm a prisoner again." His jaw tightened. "You're protected." "There's a difference?" Something dangerous flashed across his face. He crossed to the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, then reconsidered and poured a second glass. He brought it to me, pressing it into my hands. "Drink," he ordered. "You're still shaking." I was. My hands trembled so badly the amber liquid rippled in the glass. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and the horrifying realization of how close I'd come to dying. "They were shooting at me," I said, the words feeling distant, like they belonged to someone else's story. "Those were real bullets." "I know." Elio sat beside me, closer than he'd been since our wedding night. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the muscle ticking in his jaw. "This is my fault." I looked at him sharply. "Your fault?" I should have anticipated this. His hands clenched into fists. "The Santoros have been making moves for months. I knew they were getting bolder. I should have increased your security sooner. Should have what? Kept me locked in the estate permanently?" The scotch burned going down, but I welcomed it. "I'm not a possession to be guarded, Elio. I'm a person. A person who almost died today because of me." His voice was raw. "Because you're my wife." The word hung between us, loaded with meanings we'd both been avoiding for 3 months. "Why do you care?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "You made it clear before we were even married that you didn't want me, that I was just a strategic asset." His head snapped toward me, shock written plainly across his features. "What?" "I heard you," I continued, the scotch loosening my tongue, 3 months of hurt pouring out. "The day of the wedding. You were in the study with Bruno and Dario. You said you didn't want me, that you needed someone you could trust, not some sheltered girl who thought the mafia was romantic." Elio's face had gone completely white. "You heard that conversation." "Every word." I met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away despite the burning in my eyes. "So forgive me if I'm confused about why you're suddenly so concerned about my safety. Protecting your investment." He stood abruptly, turning his back to me, his shoulders rigid with tension. For a long moment, He said nothing, just stared out at the river as the sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Do you want to know why I said those things? His voice was quiet, controlled, but underneath I heard something brittle. The real reason? Enlighten me. He turned, and the expression on his face stole my breath. Pain, raw and unhidden, the mask he wore so carefully completely stripped away. Because I was terrified, he said simply. I took one look at you when your father first brought you to discuss the arrangement, and I was terrified. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Terrified of what? Of you. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving mine. Of what you made me feel. I'd spent 15 years in this life building walls, making sure I cared about nothing and no one because caring makes you weak, makes you vulnerable. And then there you were, with your defiant eyes and stubborn chin, looking at me like you could see through every defense I'd built. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Elio, I wanted you from the first moment I saw you, he continued, the words spilling out like he'd been holding them back for too long. Not just physically, though Christo, yes, that too, but I wanted to hear you laugh, wanted to know what made you angry, what made you happy, wanted things I had no business wanting from a marriage that was supposed to be purely strategic. So, you decided to hurt me first? The accusation came out sharper than I'd intended. To make sure I knew my place before I could get any foolish ideas? I decided to protect myself, he corrected, running a hand through his hair. And in doing so, I hurt you. Hurt us both. Because these past 3 months have been hell, Ginevra. Living in the same house with you, seeing you every day, knowing I did this. Knowing I destroyed any chance we might have had before we even began. I set down my glass with shaking hands, trying to process what he was saying. You're telling me that all this time, the distance, the coldness, it was because you wanted me too much? I'm telling you that I'm a coward, he said flatly. I'm telling you that I chose fear over honesty, and it nearly cost you your life today. He knelt in front of me, and the sight of this powerful man on his knees was so shocking I couldn't find words. When I got the alert that you were being followed, he said, his voice rough. When I heard those gunshots over the phone, I realized something. I would burn this entire city to ash before I let anything happen to you. I would kill every Santoro, destroy every rival, burn every bridge I've built if it meant keeping you safe. Elio, let me finish. His hands covered mine, warm and solid. I don't want a strategic asset, Ginevra. I don't want a broodmare or a trophy wife. I want you. The woman who glares at me across the dinner table when she's forced to attend my business meetings. The woman who turned the East Wing into an art gallery out of pure spite. The woman who has more courage in her little finger than most of my men have in their entire bodies. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't bother wiping them away. You have a strange way of showing it. I know. His thumb traced circles on my wrist. And I know I have no right to ask this after everything I've done. But Ginevra, give me a chance. Let me prove that I can be more than the cold bastard you married. Let me show you that this marriage could be real. I thought about the past 3 months. The loneliness, the rejection, the hollow ache of living with a man who treated me like furniture. But I also thought about Bruno's words. He's not the man you think he is. About the tripled security, the obsessive tracking of my movements, the fear in Elio's voice when I'd been attacked. Actions, not words. What had Lena said? Pay attention to what he does, not what he says. I need guarantees, I said finally, and watched hope flare in his eyes. I won't be kept in the dark about your business. If I'm a target because I'm your wife, then I deserve to know what I'm up against. Agreed. I want to be your partner, not your possession. That means I get a voice in decisions that affect us both. Agreed. And I want the truth, Elio. Always. No more protection through deception. No more lies, even kind ones. He nodded slowly. I can do that. On one condition. What? You give me the same honesty. His hands tightened on mine. Tell me what you need from me. Tell me when I'm failing you. Tell me if... He swallowed hard. If you can ever forgive me for how this started. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or strategy. But all I saw was raw vulnerability, a man who had just handed me the power to destroy him. I heard something else that day, I said quietly. Something you might not remember saying. His brow furrowed. What? Dario asked if you'd pretend to want me on our wedding night, and you said you'd do your duty, nothing more. Elio closed his eyes, pain etching lines around his mouth. Cristo, Ginevra, but here's what I've realized. I freed one hand to cup his jaw, feeling the roughness of late-day stubble. You were lying then, too. You were lying to them and to yourself, because that night, when you touched me, it wasn't cold. It wasn't clinical. You were holding back, trying so hard not to feel anything that it was almost painful to watch. His eyes opened, and I saw my own realization reflected there. I was terrified I'd lose control, he admitted hoarsely. That I'd show you how much I wanted you, and you'd use it against me. Use it as leverage, as a weapon. I'm not interested in weapons, Elio. I leaned forward until our foreheads touched. I'm interested in truth. And the truth is, I've spent 3 months trying to hate you. Trying to convince myself that the hollow ache in my chest was relief, not loneliness. Trying to pretend I didn't notice every time you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching. You noticed, he breathed. I noticed everything. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I noticed how you always made sure my favorite wine was stocked. How the temperature in my wing was always perfect. How you convinced the opera house to give me that private box, even though you claimed to hate opera. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I do hate opera. And yet you arranged season tickets because I mentioned once that I missed it. Because seeing you happy made the suffering worthwhile. We were so close now I could feel his breath on my lips, could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. If we do this, I said softly, if we try to make this marriage real, there's no going back. No more separate wings. No more distance. No more distance, he agreed, starting now. He kissed me then, and it was nothing like our wedding night. This kiss was desperate, hungry, 3 months of denied want pouring into it. His hands framed my face with a reverence that made my heart ache. His lips moving against mine like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. I kissed him back with equal fervor, my fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. The blanket fell away, forgotten, as he lifted me from the sofa, his arms banding around me like he was afraid I might disappear. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. I don't deserve you, he murmured. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to. Good, I said, and meant it. Because I'm not an easy woman to love, Elio Vieira. No, he agreed, a real smile transforming his face. But then, I'm not an easy man to love either. We'll figure it out together. Together. The word felt like a promise and a revelation. So what happens now? I asked. With the Santoros? His expression hardened, the ruthless mafia boss emerging again. Now we show them what happens when someone threatens what's mine. But first... His hand found mine, fingers interlacing. First, I'm going to spend the night showing my wife how much I want her. How much I've always wanted her. Heat flooded through me at the promise in his voice. The whole night? The whole night, he confirmed. And every night after, for the rest of our lives. The war with the Santoro family lasted exactly 1 week. 7 days of violence that painted Chicago's streets red, of raids and counter-raids, of old alliances tested and new ones forged. I watched it unfold from the safe house, glued to news reports that carefully didn't mention the real reasons behind the sudden surge in gang activity. Elio came to me every night, sometimes bloodied, always exhausted, and I learned a new side of my husband. The warrior who commanded men with absolute authority, the strategist who thought 10 moves ahead, the man who would do anything, sacrifice anyone, to protect what was his. Dario's been feeding information to the Santoros, he told me on the 4th night, his voice flat with betrayal as I cleaned a cut on his knuckles. For months. That's how they knew your route from the restaurant. I paused, antiseptic-soaked cloth hovering over his split skin. Your cousin? My cousin. The words were bitter. Bruno is handling it. I didn't ask what handling it meant. I was learning that some questions were better left unasked. What will you do with the Santoros? I asked instead, resuming my careful cleaning of his wounds. What I should have done years ago. His free hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. Eliminate them as a threat. Permanently. The old me, the me from before the wedding, might have been horrified. But I'd heard those gunshots, felt the terror of being hunted. I'd seen what mercy got you in this world. More violence, more bloodshed, more chances for the people you loved to be hurt. Do what you need to do, I said quietly. Just come back to me. His eyes softened, always. And he did, every night, no matter how late. Sometimes he'd wake me with gentle kisses. Other times he'd find me already awake, waiting. We'd make love with an urgency born of danger and newfound honesty. And afterward he'd hold me close, his heartbeat steady against my ear, and tell me things he'd never told anyone. About his father, who'd raised him in the life with an iron fist and absent affection. About the first time he'd killed a man at 17, how it had changed something fundamental inside him. About the loneliness of power, of being surrounded by people but trusted by no one. Until you, he'd murmur into my hair. I trust you, Ginevra. And I'd tell him my own secrets. About the mother who'd slowly faded away, choosing pills over fighting. About my dreams of Florence, of studying Renaissance art in museums instead of just reading about it. About the fear that I'd become like all the other mafia wives, hollow and ornamental. You could never be hollow, he'd say fiercely. You have too much fire. On the 7th day, Bruno arrived at the safe house with news. It's done, boss, he said, his expression grim. Antonio Santoro and his 2 sons are dead. The rest of the family is scattered or swearing fealty. I watched Elio's face, looking for guilt or regret. Found neither. Just cold satisfaction. And Dario? He asked. Also handled. Bruno's gaze flicked to me briefly. Should we... Ginevra knows, Elio interrupted. She knows everything. Something like approval crossed Bruno's weathered features. In that case, Mrs. Vieira, your husband took out an entire crime family in less than a week. The other families are taking notice. The Vieira name carries more weight than ever. At what cost? I asked quietly. 37 of their men dead, Bruno reported. 12 of ours wounded, 3 killed. Could have been much worse. 3 families would be grieving tonight because of this war. 3 women would be widows. Children would grow up without fathers. The weight of it settled on my shoulders, heavy and inescapable. I want to meet them, I said suddenly. The families of our people who died. Both men looked at me in surprise. That's not typically done, Bruno said carefully. The boss usually sends a generous payment, arranges the funerals. I didn't ask what was typically done, I interrupted. I asked to meet them. Elio studied me for a long moment. Why? Because 3 men died protecting me, protecting us. The least I can do is look their families in the eye and thank them. It could be dangerous, he said. Some might blame you for... They should blame me. I met his gaze steadily. I was the target. Their husbands, their fathers. They died because the Santoros wanted to hurt you through me. I owe them more than money. Pride flickered in Elio's eyes. Then we'll go together. The visits were brutal. Seeing the raw grief, the children too young to understand why Daddy wasn't coming home, the widows trying to be strong while their worlds collapsed. Each time I held their hands, let them cry on my shoulder, promised that their loved one's sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. Elio stood beside me through all of it, his presence a solid anchor. And I saw something shift in the way his men looked at us. At me, not just respect for the boss's wife, but genuine loyalty for a woman who honored their fallen. You were right, Elio said as we returned to the safe house after the last visit. About meeting them. I know. I leaned against him, exhausted emotionally if not physically. But that doesn't make it easier. Nothing worth doing is easy. His arms came around me, holding me close. Come home with me, Ginevra. The threat is neutralized. It's safe now. Home. The estate that had felt like a prison for 3 months. But with Elio beside me, maybe it could be something different. On one condition, I said. Anything. No more separate wings. We share a room. A life. No more distance. He pulled back enough to see my face, hope, and heat mingling in his expression. You want to move into the master suite? I want to build something new, I corrected. Not live in your space or mine. Ours. Understanding dawned. The south wing. It's been closed off for years, but it has the best views, the most privacy. Then that's where we'll make our home. I rose on my toes to kiss him. Starting tonight. The south wing of the Vieira estate was a revelation. While the rest of the house was all modern minimalism and cold marble, this section had been preserved from an earlier era. Crown molding, original hardwood floors, a massive fireplace in what would become our bedroom. My grandmother's wing, Elio explained as we walked through dusty rooms. She died when I was 12. My father kept it closed after that, said it was too painful to go in. I could see why. There was warmth here that the rest of the house lacked. Evidence of a woman who'd made this place a home rather than just a showpiece. Tell me about her, I said, running my fingers over the carved mantelpiece. She was the only soft thing in my father's life, Elio said quietly. The only person who could make him smile. When she died, he became harder, colder, turned me into what he thought a Vieira heir should be. What would she think of me? I asked, voicing the question that had been nagging at me. Elio's hand found mine, warm and solid. She'd love you. She always said I needed someone strong enough to stand up to me, soft enough to remind me I was human. I'm not sure I'm all that soft. You're soft where it matters. His free hand pressed over my heart. In here. Over the next 2 weeks, we transformed the south wing. Contractors worked around the clock, carefully preserving the original character while adding modern amenities. I chose furniture and artwork. Elio handled security upgrades and technology. We argued about paint colors, compromised on window treatments, made love on dusty drop cloths while workers were at lunch. It was domestic and normal, and utterly foreign to both of us, and I loved every minute of it. The bed arrives tomorrow, Elio said one evening as we sat in what would become our bedroom, drinking wine directly from the bottle like teenagers. About time. I leaned against him, pleasantly buzzed and completely content. I'm tired of the guest room. I could always carry you to my old room, he suggested, his hand finding its way under my shirt. Too far away. I straddled his lap, feeling him harden immediately beneath me. Besides, I like it here. It feels like ours. Everything I have is ours now, he murmured against my neck. The estate, the businesses, the empire, all of it. I pulled back to look at him. I don't want your empire, Elio. I know. That's why I'm giving it to you anyway. His hand spanned my waist. When we have children, they'll inherit everything. But if something happens to me before then, it all goes to you. Nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that. His expression turned serious. This life, it's dangerous. There will always be someone trying to take what's ours. I need to know that if I fall, you'll be protected. Powerful enough that no one would dare touch you. The thought of losing him made my chest tighten painfully. Don't talk like that. I'm being practical. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. My lawyer is drawing up new documents. Everything in my name becomes joint ownership. You'll have access to all accounts, all properties, all business interests. Elio, that's non-negotiable, he finished. You're my wife, Ginevra, my partner. It's time you had the power to match the position. I didn't know what to say. In the Mafia world, wives were protected, but powerless. The fact that Elio was willing to give me actual control, actual access, was unprecedented. Thank you, I whispered finally. Don't thank me for what should have been yours from the beginning. He kissed me softly. Now, about that bed being too far away. We made love there on the floor of our unfinished bedroom, surrounded by paint cans and contractor debris, and it was perfect. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with moonlight streaming through uncurtained windows, I felt something I'd never expected to feel in this marriage. Happiness. Real, genuine, terrifying happiness. I'm falling in love with you, I said into the darkness, the words escaping before I could stop them. Elio went completely still. Then his arms tightened around me, and I felt him press a kiss to my hair. I fell in love with you the day I met you, he admitted. I've just been too much of a coward to say it. My heart felt too large for my chest. Say it now. I love you, Ginevra Vieira. His voice was rough with emotion. I love your strength, your fire, your refusal to be what anyone expects. I love that you make me want to be better, even though I'll probably always be a bastard. I turned in his arms to face him. I love you too, even though you're definitely a bastard. He laughed, the sound pure and joyful. We're quite a pair. The best pair, I corrected, kissing him again. We were wrong, of course. The war with the Santoros was over, but our trials were just beginning. Because in our world, happiness was always temporary, and danger was always waiting in the shadows. 2 months later, I woke up with my head in the toilet. Again. Ginevra? Ilio's voice came from the bedroom, concerned. That's the 3rd morning this week. I rinsed my mouth, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Pale skin, dark circles under my eyes, and a suspicion that had been growing for the past week. When had my last period been? 6 weeks ago? 7? I'm fine, I called back, though my hands were shaking as I gripped the marble countertop. Just something I ate. Elio appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day in charcoal slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal his forearms. You said that yesterday, and it's still true. He studied me with those perceptive gray eyes. You're a terrible liar, amore. The endearment, which he'd started using regularly over the past weeks, made my heart squeeze. We'd been so happy lately, settling into our new life together. The south wing was finally finished, our private sanctuary within the larger estate. We took meals together, fell asleep tangled in each other, woke to slow morning kisses. I didn't want anything to disrupt that fragile happiness, especially not when I wasn't sure yet. I have a meeting with the charity board this afternoon, I said, changing the subject. The fundraiser next month is Ginevra. He crossed to me, tilting my chin up. What's wrong? And because I'd promised him honesty, always honesty, I said it. I think I might be pregnant. The words hung in the air between us. Elio's face went completely blank, his body going very still. For a long moment, he said nothing, and my heart sank. This was too much, too soon. We'd only been truly together for 2 months. We were still learning each other, still building. Pregnant, he repeated softly. His hand moved from my chin to my stomach, pressing gently against the flat plane. Our baby. Maybe, I cautioned. I haven't taken a test yet. I could just be sick. Take one. His voice was rough. Now. Elio, please, Ginevra, I need to know. There was something in his expression, a vulnerability I'd rarely seen, that made me nod. Okay. Bruno was dispatched to acquire several different pregnancy tests. He returned within an hour, his face carefully neutral as he handed the discreet bag to me. I locked myself in the bathroom while Elio paced the bedroom. 3 tests, all different brands. I lined them up on the counter and waited the requisite time, my heart hammering against my ribs. 3 tests, 3 positive results. I opened the door to find Elio frozen mid-pace. Our eyes met, and I nodded once. I'm pregnant. He was across the room in 2 strides, lifting me off my feet and spinning me in a circle. His laugh was pure joy, uninhibited in a way I'd never heard before. We're having a baby, he said, setting me down gently, reverently. Cristo, Ginevra, we're going to be parents. Relief flooded through me. You're happy? Happy? He cupped my face, his eyes bright. I'm terrified and ecstatic and completely unprepared. But yes, amore, I'm happy. We told no one else, keeping the news to ourselves for the first precious weeks. Elio became impossibly protective, hovering whenever I so much as stood up too quickly. Security doubled, then tripled. My diet was scrutinized by a nutritionist he hired. Dr. Caesar, the family physician, began making house calls weekly. You're going to drive me insane, I told him one evening as he insisted I elevate my feet. I'm keeping you safe, he countered. Both of you. But the world outside our happy bubble was shifting. Bruno came to us 3 weeks after we'd learned about the pregnancy, his expression grim. We have a problem, he said, laying a folder on Elio's desk. Marcus Vitale is making moves. I knew that name. Vitale ran one of the smaller families, always ambitious, always hungry for more power. He'd been at our wedding, all smiles and false congratulations. What kind of moves? Elio asked, his arm tightening around me where I sat on the edge of his desk. He's been meeting with the other families, suggesting that you've gone soft. Bruno's gaze flicked to me apologetically. That marriage has made you weak. Let me guess, Elio said dryly. He's offering to step in and provide the strong leadership Chicago needs? Essentially. Bruno pulled out photos. He's also been courting some of your lower-level guys, offering better deals, more territory. I studied the photographs, seeing men I recognized from estate functions. Has anyone taken him up on it? Not yet. Bruno's expression darkened. But he's persistent, and he's playing on old resentments, the guys who think you've been neglecting business to play house. The accusation stung, even secondhand. Elio's hand found mine, squeezing gently. They're wrong, he said quietly. The business has never been stronger. Profits are up. Territories are secure. Our alliances are solid. I know that, boss. You know that. But Vitale's good at whispers and insinuations. Bruno hesitated. There's something else. Tell me. He knows about the baby. Ice flooded my veins. How? We're not sure yet. Could be someone on staff. Could be he's got an informant in Dr. Caesar's office. But he's been making noise about the Vieira heir. About how convenient it would be if something happened to you before the child was born. Elio's face went absolutely cold. He threatened my wife and child. He's too smart to make direct threats, Bruno corrected. But the implication is clear. I watched my husband transform before my eyes. The loving, protective man I'd woken up beside became the ruthless crime lord who commanded fear across the city. His eyes turned to steel, his expression carved from ice. "Call a meeting," he said quietly. "All family heads, tomorrow night, and make sure Vitali knows he's expected." After Bruno left, Elio pulled me into his arms, his control fracturing slightly. "I won't let him hurt you," he promised against my hair. "I won't let anyone hurt you or our baby." "I know." I held him tightly. "But Elio, you need to be smart about this. Vitali is goading you, trying to make you overreact. There's no overreaction when someone threatens my family." "Then be strategic," I urged. "Don't give him what he wants. Show everyone that you're not weak, that marriage hasn't made you vulnerable. Show them you're stronger than ever." He pulled back to look at me, something like awe in his expression. "How did you get so wise?" "I married a crime lord," I said dryly. "I learned to think like one." The meeting of the families was held at one of Elio's downtown properties, a penthouse that served as neutral ground for interfamily business. I wasn't supposed to attend. Women never attended these meetings, but I insisted. "If they think you're weak because of me," I argued, "then they need to see that I'm not a weakness. I'm an asset." Elio hesitated, clearly torn between protecting me and recognizing the political wisdom of my presence. "You stay beside me," he finally agreed. "And you let me handle Vitale." "Of course," I kissed him softly. "I'm just there to look intimidating." His laugh was strained. "You in that dress will definitely intimidate them." I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A black sheath dress that was elegantly modest but undeniably expensive, my grandmother's ruby necklace, my hair in a sleek chignon. I looked every inch the mafia wife, powerful and untouchable. The other family heads were already assembled when we arrived. 5 men of varying ages, all dangerous in their own ways, all watching with calculating eyes as Elio and I entered together. Marcus Vitale was younger than I'd expected, mid-40s with silver threading his dark hair. Handsome in a polished way, expensive suit, practiced smile. He rose as we approached, extending a hand to Elio. "Vieira, good of you to call this meeting. And Mrs. Vieira." His eyes raked over me with undisguised interest. "Looking radiant as always. Married life agrees with you." "It does," I replied coolly, allowing my hand to rest protectively over my still flat stomach. The gesture was deliberate, claiming my pregnancy publicly. I saw the calculation in Vitali's eyes, the quick assessment and dismissal. He thought I was a weakness, a distraction. He had no idea. Elio guided me to the head of the table, seating me on his right before addressing the room. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming. It's come to my attention that there are concerns about the direction of Vieira operations. I thought it best we address them directly." "No concerns from me," said Giovanni Russo, the oldest of the family heads. "Your numbers speak for themselves." "As do mine," added Leo Carbone. "The new distribution routes you established have been very profitable." Vitale smiled thinly. "Of course the business side is strong. Elio's always been good with numbers. My concern is more philosophical." "Oh?" Elio's voice was dangerously soft. "Enlighten us." "This life requires certain qualities," Vitale said, leaning back in his chair. "Ruthlessness, focus, the willingness to put business before personal attachments." His gaze slid to me. Some might worry that domestic bliss could dull those qualities. Some might, Elio agreed. Are you worried, Marcus? The use of his first name, dropping the respectful surname, was a calculated insult. I saw Vitale's jaw tighten. I'm concerned for all of us, he said smoothly. When one family shows weakness, we all become vulnerable. Weakness. Elio's laugh was cold. Let me tell you what I see when I look at my marriage, Marcus. I see a woman who has made me more strategic, more focused, more dangerous than I ever was alone. I see someone who understands this life better than most men born into it. I see the future mother of my heir, who will inherit an empire twice the size of the one I inherited. He stood, his presence filling the room. You want to talk about weakness? Let's talk about you. You've been bleeding territory for the past year. Your men jump ship because you rule through fear instead of loyalty. You're so desperate for power that you've resorted to making veiled threats against a pregnant woman. Vitale's face flushed. I never... You did. Elio's voice cut through the protest. And everyone at this table knows it. The question is, what should I do about it? The room went deadly silent. I could feel the tension, every man waiting to see how this would play out. You have two choices, Marcus, Elio continued. You can apologize to my wife, swear fealty to the Vieira family, and accept a significant reduction in your territory as penance. Or you can refuse, and we settle this the old way. The old way. Challenge. Blood. Vitale's eyes darted around the table, looking for support. Found none. Whatever allies he'd been courting had clearly decided Elio was the safer bet. I meant no disrespect to Mrs. Vieira, he said finally, the words clearly costing him. Or to your child. That wasn't an apology. Vitale's hands clenched on the table. I apologize for any misunderstanding about my intentions. Better. Elio sat back down, his hand finding mine under the table. Bruno will contact you tomorrow about the territory adjustments. This meeting is adjourned. I should have known it was too easy. Should have recognized that a man like Marcus Vitale wouldn't accept humiliation lying down. 2 weeks after the meeting, I was 6 months pregnant and beginning to show. Elio had become impossibly protective, barely letting me out of his sight. But I had a charity event to attend, a fundraiser I'd been planning for months, and I refused to let fear keep me locked away. I'll have 10 guards, I assured him that morning. Bruno's driving me personally. It's the museum, Elio, not a war zone. Everywhere is a war zone, he muttered, adjusting my necklace with gentle fingers. But you're right. I can't keep you prisoner. You could try, I teased, rising on my toes to kiss him. But I'd make your life hell. You already do, amore. But he was smiling. Call me when you get there, and when you're leaving, and every hour in between. The fundraiser was beautiful, the museum transformed with flowers and string lights. I circulated among Chicago's elite, many of whom had finally accepted me as Elio's wife, chatting about art and charitable causes while my security detail maintained a discreet perimeter. I was in the middle of discussing a new scholarship program when Bruno appeared at my elbow, his face ashen. Mrs. Vieira, we need to leave. Now. The urgency in his voice made my heart jump. What's wrong? The boss. There's been an incident. The world tilted. What kind of incident? Not here. Bruno's hand was already at my elbow, guiding me toward the exit. I'll explain in the car. The drive back to the estate was the longest of my life. Bruno's explanation was terse, clinical, but the words painted a horrific picture. Vitale hadn't accepted his defeat. He'd been planning something bigger, something that would eliminate Elio and allow him to absorb the Vieira territory. He'd arranged a meeting under the guise of discussing the territory transfers, then ambushed Elio with a dozen armed men. How bad? I asked, my hands protectively cradling my belly. He's alive, Bruno said, which wasn't an answer. Dr. Caesar is with him now. The estate was in chaos when we arrived. Armed men everywhere, the staff pale and frightened. I ran through the house, as much as a 6-month pregnant woman could run, following the sound of urgent voices to our bedroom. Elio lay on our bed, his shirt cut away, Dr. Caesar working frantically on a wound in his shoulder. There was so much blood, soaking the sheets, staining the doctor's hands. Elio. His name came out as a sob. His eyes opened, finding mine. Ginevra. You're supposed to be at the fundraiser. You're supposed to not get shot, I countered, moving to his side. My hands were shaking as I took his, sticky with blood. What happened? Vitale. The name was a curse. Bastard had 12 men waiting. I only had 4. Where is he now? I asked, looking at Bruno. In the wind, Bruno replied grimly. But we're hunting him. Dr. Caesar looked up. Mrs. Vieira, I need space to work. I'm not leaving him. Ginevra. Elio tried to sit up, winced. The baby is fine, I interrupted. But you're not. How bad is it, doctor? The bullet went through cleanly, Dr. Caesar said, returning to his work. Missed the major arteries. He'll need rest and antibiotics, but he'll recover. Relief made my knees weak. Thank God. Not God, Elio said, his voice strained but steady. Bruno. He drove like a maniac to get me here. Over the next hours, the full story emerged. Vitale's ambush had been carefully planned, but he'd underestimated Elio's survival instinct and Bruno's skill. They'd fought their way out, but Elio had taken a bullet in the process. Now Vitale was missing, along with his closest associates. Every contact, every safe house, every business front, all abandoned. He's running, Bruno reported that evening while Elio slept fitfully, drugged with painkillers. But he can't run far. We've put the word out. Every family, every associate. Marcus Vitale is a dead man walking. I sat beside Elio's bed, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall. The fear I'd felt, seeing him bloody and wounded, had crystallized into something harder. Something cold. I want to help find him, I said quietly. Bruno looked at me sharply. Mrs. Vieira, I'm not going to sit here waiting while that bastard is out there planning his next attack. I met his gaze steadily. Elio's vulnerable right now. Someone needs to run things while he recovers. With all due respect, you're 6 months pregnant. With all due respect, I'm also the wife of the head of this family, which means I have authority. I stood, moving to the window. Call a meeting of the lieutenants, tomorrow morning. It's time they learned what kind of woman Elio married. I saw doubt in Bruno's eyes, but also something like respect. I'll make the calls. The meeting was held in Elio's study. 10 of his most trusted men gathered around the conference table. They looked skeptical when I walked in, this pregnant woman presuming to give them orders. Gentlemen, I began, standing at the head of the table where Elio usually sat. As you know, my husband is recovering from an attempted assassination. Until he's back on his feet, I'll be coordinating our response to Marcus Vitale's attack. With all respect, Mrs. Vieira, one of them began. I thought his name was Tony. This is men's business. This is family business, I corrected. And I'm family. Now, Bruno, walk me through what we know about Vitale's whereabouts. For the next hour, I absorbed everything they told me. Vitale's known associates, his properties, his patterns of behavior. I asked questions, probed for weaknesses, and slowly, I saw their skepticism transform into grudging respect. He has a sister, I said finally. Unmarried, lives alone in Lincoln Park. Has he contacted her? We have people watching her place, Bruno confirmed. No activity. He won't go there himself, I reasoned. Too obvious. But he might send a message, a courier, someone she'd trust. I looked at Tony. You grew up in that neighborhood. Who would she trust? His eyes widened. Her priest, Father Donovan at St. Mary's. Put someone on the church, I ordered. Discreet surveillance. If a message comes through the priest, we'll know. Bruno nodded approvingly. Good thinking. I'd been right. 2 days later, one of our people spotted Vitale's sister receiving a phone call at the church, then immediately leaving with a packed bag. We followed her to a small cabin 2 hours north of the city. And there, we found Marcus Vitale, hiding like the coward he was. Elio was still recovering when Bruno and the others brought Vitale back, bound and bloody. I was in the study, reviewing security protocols, when they arrived. Mrs. Vieira, Bruno said, we have him. What would you like us to do? It was a test, I realized. They were testing whether I had the steel to do what needed to be done. I looked at Vitale, at the man who had tried to kill my husband, who had threatened my unborn child. And I felt nothing but cold purpose. Put him in the wine cellar, I said calmly. Secure him. I'll tell my husband he's here. Elio was sitting up when I entered our bedroom, his color better, though he still moved carefully. You've been busy, he observed, gesturing to the reports scattered across the bed. Someone had to be. I sat beside him carefully. We found Vitale. His eyes sharpened. Where? I told him everything. How I'd run the organization in his absence. How I'd reasoned out Vitale's hiding place. How the men now looked at me with respect instead of dismissal. You did this, he said wonderingly. You found him. You commanded my men. You, Cristo, Ginevra, you were magnificent. I was terrified, I admitted, but also angry. He tried to take you from me, from our baby. I couldn't let that stand. Elio cupped my face, his touch reverent. What do you want to do with him? It was my choice, I realized. My husband was giving me the power to decide Marcus Vitale's fate. I want you to handle it, I said finally. But I want to be there when you do. I want him to see that the woman he dismissed, the weakness he thought he could exploit, was the one who found him. Pride blazed in Elio's eyes. Tomorrow night, when I'm stronger. That night, as we lay together in the darkness, Elio's hand resting on my swollen belly, I felt our baby kick for the first time. Strong, insistent movements that made us both laugh with wonder. She's a fighter, Elio murmured, like her mother. Or he is, I countered, like his father. Either way, our child will know strength. His lips found mine in the darkness. And love. And family. The next evening, I stood beside Elio in the wine cellar while Marcus Vitale knelt before us, defiant even in defeat. You made a mistake, Elio said quietly. You thought my wife was my weakness. But she's my strength, Vitale. She's the reason I survive, the reason I fight, the reason I build instead of just destroy. She's just a woman, Vitale spat. No. I stepped forward, my hand resting protectively over my belly. I'm the woman who found you. The woman who commanded the men you thought would follow you. The woman carrying the next generation of Vieira power. I looked at Elio. I've seen enough. Do what needs to be done. We left the cellar together, Elio's arm around my waist, leaving Bruno to handle the rest. I didn't need to watch, didn't need to know the details. I just needed to know that the threat was eliminated, that my family was safe. 3 months later, I went into labor on a snowy December evening. Elio was beside me the entire time, holding my hand, coaching my breathing, looking more terrified than I'd ever seen him face down enemies. "You're doing so well, amore," he murmured, wiping sweat from my forehead. "So strong." "Easy for you to say," I gasped between contractions. "You're not the one." The pain cut off my words, and I bore down, following Dr. Caesar's instructions. Push, breathe, push again. And then, finally, a cry. Strong and furious and perfect. "It's a girl," Dr. Caesar announced, placing our daughter on my chest. She was beautiful. Dark hair like Elio's, and when she opened her eyes, I saw they were the same stormy gray as her father's. 10 perfect fingers, 10 perfect toes, and lungs that were clearly already healthy from the way she was screaming. "Hello, little one," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "We've been waiting for you." Elio's hand was gentle on our daughter's head, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "She's perfect. You're both perfect." "What should we name her?" I asked, looking up at him. "Elena," he said immediately. "After my grandmother, the woman who taught me that strength and softness could exist together." "Elena Vieira." I tested the name. "I love it." Our daughter, apparently satisfied with her name, stopped crying and blinked up at us with those serious gray eyes. "She's already judging us," I said, laughing through my tears. "Smart girl," Elio murmured, leaning down to kiss me softly. "Takes after her mother." Later, when Elena was sleeping in my arms and Elio sat beside us on the hospital bed, his arm around my shoulders, I thought about everything that had brought us here. The rejection I'd overheard before our wedding, the attack that had forced us together, the revelations of Elio's fears and my own strength, the war with Vitale that had tested us both. And finally, this. Our daughter, the physical manifestation of everything we'd built together. "Do you remember what you said the day we got married?" I asked quietly. "That you didn't want me? That I was just strategic?" Elio's arm tightened around me. "My greatest lie. And my greatest regret." "Mine too," I admitted. "Because I believed you. I believed I wasn't wanted, wasn't valued. And now?" His voice was soft. I looked down at our sleeping daughter, then up at my husband. "Now I know the truth. You didn't reject me because you didn't want me. You rejected me because you wanted me too much, because I terrified you." "You still do," he admitted. "The power you have over me, the things I'd do to keep you safe. It's terrifying." "Good." I kissed him softly. "Because you terrify me too. This life, this love, this family we've built, it's more than I ever dreamed possible." Elena stirred in my arms, making small snuffling sounds, and we both looked down at her with matching expressions of wonder. "She saved us, you know," Elio said quietly. "Or you did, carrying her, giving me a reason to be better than I was." "We saved each other," I corrected. "That's what family does." And as I sat there, my daughter in my arms, my husband beside me, I realized something. I'd spent my whole life preparing to escape the mafia world, but I'd never realized that sometimes the greatest freedom comes not from running away, but from finding your place within the chaos. From finding the person who sees your strength and doesn't fear it, who values your voice and doesn't silence it, who loves you not despite your fire but because of it. I'd married a monster, or so I'd thought. But I'd discovered that monsters were just men who'd never been given a reason to be human. And I'd given Elio that reason, just as he'd given me mine.